I was going to talk about Pesach tonight, but I said to myself that there is something that needs to be studied before we enter the great limud of Pesach itself. We need to find the master key, the mafteach that unlocks all the beracha and all the shefa that Pesach has to offer. And if you don't start with that, coming to Pesach is already the next step. So let's start tonight with the step one, the mafteach, the master key, that opens up all of the shefa and the blessing of the great Chag of Pesach. I'm referring to nothing less than the great concept of Birkat Hailanot. This is a very misunderstood concept. It's also very underrated in a way. I want to talk tonight about this amazing Gemara. The Gemara is found in Masechet Berachot, Daf Mem Gimel Amud Bet. The Mar Mekomot of tonight's share comes from Yedid Nafshi, Rabbi Gladstein, Hashem should bless him, with Arichut Yamim Rishanim, give him Siyata Deshmaya. Continue to give off amazing and beautiful Mar Mekomot and Torah to Klal Yisrael. Rabotai, listen to this Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hai man, the nafik biyome Nisan. The person who goes out in the days of Nisan, the month of Nisan, v'chazeh, and what does he see? Ilanot, trees. Dekamilavleve, that are in the stage of milavleve. We're going to have to explain what that word means. Omer, you know what he says? Baruch shelo chiser ba'olamo klum, uvaravo biriot tovot, ilanot tovot, lehitnaot. Actually, the blessing we say is lehanot, but the Gemara says lehitnaot, bahen bnei adam. So, when you're out there in the days of Nisan, and you come across trees, fruit trees, and you see that they are in the stage of milavleve, we're going to have to explain what that is. You are to make the blessing. Baruch Hashem is the Makor HaBeracha that did not lack from this world nothing. Briot Tovot, Ilanot Tovot, He did it all. In order to what? In order to give pleasure to Bnei Adam. That's the blessing we make. Birkat Ilanot. Now what's amazing to me is that this Gemara again highlights the brilliance of what Torah is all about. Because it's amazing that every single word, every word in the Gemara we just read, you're able to be doresh, tile, tilim of halachot from every single word. Listen to this, just to give you an example. What does the Gemara say? Haiman the nafik biyome the Nisan. In the days of Nisan. What does that mean? Does that mean that you could only make it by day, but not by night? Yome the Nisan. So what's the halacha? If someone wants to make Birkat Ilanot at night, is it yotzeh? It says Yome the Nisan. But then again it says the next question, Nisan. What about if the guy wanted to do it the last day of Adar? It was a year like this year, a leap year, where the trees are a month ahead of schedule. They're cooked an extra month when it comes to their growth. So that means, very possibly, that you come the last day of Adar and you can come by a fruit tree and you can see that it's in the process of milavleve. What happens if you made the blessing Birkat Ilanot in the month of Adar? Not Nisan. Will you yotzeh? Or maybe a typical year that during Nisan the trees didn't develop yet. It didn't develop until ER. So now this guy goes and he wants to do it in ER. Is he yotzeh the mitzvah Birkat Ilanot? The Gemara says biyome de Nisan. Does it dafka have to be the month of Nisan in order for the mitzvah Birkat Ilanot to be proper? What's the next word in the Gemara? V'chaze ilaneh. Ilaneh means trees, plural. So does that mean that there's a requirement that when you go to do Birkat Ilanot, it must be trees? What happens if you make Birkat Ilanot on one fruit tree? Will you yotzeh? Does it have to be Ilaneh? How about the next word in the Gemara? The Kamelavleve. Well, that's a real question. What does it mean, Melavleve? Does it mean that it's sprouting, budding, flowering? What portion? There are so many different levels and stages that fruits go through, even before they even become an unripe bud or a berry of some sort. At what point is it Melavleve? So all these questions we're going to have to address tonight, because we need to know how to do Birkat Ilanot in the best, most mehudar way. Because at the end of tonight's share, we're going to find out what rides on this amazing mitzvah of Birkat Ilanot, and it's something that you can't afford to miss out on. And therefore you'd want to do it in the best possible way. So let's take it from the top. Maran and Shulchan Aruch. Maran dedicates a siman by itself to Birkat Ilanot, because this is a special Birkat HaRi'iyah. Unlike all other Birkat HaRi'iyah, you could see it once, but then if 30 days lapse and you don't see it, you can make the beracha again, but not this one. This blessing, Birkat Ilanot, Birkat HaRi'iyah, it's once a year. That's it. You get it done in Nisan, you got to wait until next year, Nisan, in order to get Birkat Ilanot done again. So Maran wanted to show a real hashibut to this Birkat Ilanot, this Birkat Ri'iyah, over all other blessings of sighting. Not like when you see an ocean or mountains, or you see lightning or hear thunder. Not like those Birkat Ri'iyah. Over here, this is once a year, and therefore, he dedicated a special siman. So what does Maran tell us? Says Maran that if you see a tree that's in the stage where it is milavleve, at that point you make the blessing like the Gemara told us. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, in his Sefer Halichot Shlomo on Pesach, he writes over there that he was so careful, he was so zahir with this particular mitzvah, Birkat Ilanot, that he could say on himself that since his bar mitzvah, he never missed the beracha Birkat Ilanot once, not even once. He never missed. He was so careful in this. This is something special. We got to grasp tonight. What is it that's so powerful about this mitzvah of Birkat Ilanot? So let's take it from the top. We're looking at a fruit tree. And we're waiting for the moment that it hits the point of milavleve. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Resh Chavav. He says, you want to know what milavleve is? We're waiting for the moment that the fruit tree starts budding and it turns from its original sprout into a flower. Now, this is an interesting stage. I actually saw it today. Today, we picked up the whole kollel this morning, and we all went out to Arni's 9th, and we did Birkat Ilanot together, because we did the shiur on Shabbat together. And we realized that we're looking for the stage when the sprout begins to flower before the berry, which actually starts developing inside the flower, even appears. You see, after it flowers, the berry begins to grow inside the flower, and as it grows, the flower itself opens up and then falls off to the side, and the berry becomes an unripe fruit. Those are the stages that a fruit goes through in its development. We're holding by the stage before the berry, the stage of flowering. It sprouted, it flowered, and now at this point, the flowering, says Mishnah Berurah, is the point of milavleve. That's the point you make the blessing. Amazing. So now, if I'm coming to a fruit tree and I'm making the blessing on the point of the flowering, does this work with any fruit tree? It's very interesting. There's a great question in the poskim if this fruit tree needs to be giving off edible fruit. Now, here in Brooklyn, this creates a little bit of a challenge, Because we could have fruit trees that actually come back every year, but because of the nature of construction in Brooklyn, they cement over everything. So you have trees, I actually saw it today, you have trees along the sidewalk, fruit trees, real fruit trees, that were cemented right over the root of the fruit tree, and now it doesn't develop as well as it once did. So now it gives off fruit, but it gives off these crabapple type of fruit that's really not edible. They just come out, fall, and they come back the next year because they're not really giving off the proper fruit anymore. What about a fruit tree that's giving off not edible fruit? Can you make Birkat Ilanot on that tree? So according to some poskim, like the Lehorot Natan, they say no. Such a tree, it's not proper to make a beracha on its fruit. It's not edible, the fruit. To the extent, it's not just if it's physically not edible. Rabbi Kiva Eger actually had this great question. What about, he was mesupak, what about making Birkat Ilanot on a tree within the first 3 years, orla, within the first 3 years of its development? We know that a fruit tree, within the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat its fruit. The fruit is asur. It's called orla. Many people think that orla is only noheg in Eretz Yisrael. It's a mistake. Orla is noheg in Chutz La'aretz as well. There are other dineh, klayim, orla, and so on, that is not noheg only in Israel, but the regular halacha of orla is noheg in Chutz La'aretz as well. So says Rabbi Kiva Eger, a big question. 1 second. If I come to a tree that's within the first 3 years of giving off fruit, an orla tree, so now the fruit is asur. So if I'm going to make a blessing on this tree, it's a fruit tree that I cannot eat its fruit. Not because the fruit isn't edible, but because it's asur la'alacha. It's orla. So can I make a beracha, Birkat Ilanot, on a fruit tree that's orla within the first 3 years? And he has a big question, Rabbi Eger. You know, the light is flashing. I'm just letting you know. The red light. Okay. So that, okay, all good, all good. But this was the question of Rabbi Eger. Again, it goes back to the same idea. When you make Birkat Ilanot on a fruit tree, does the fruit have to be edible? Does the fruit have to be mutar to eat? These are the two questions we just brought up. According to many of the poskim, it would be better that the fruit should be edible and definitely should not be in the year of or the time of orla. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for a tree that's a fruit tree in the month of Nisan, and that this tree hit the point where it's flowering, the bud turned into a flower, that's malavlave, and that it will eventually give off fruit that's edible. So far, that's what I know, what we need to get the mitzvah done proper. Okay. So now how many trees do I need? So we mentioned, the Gemara said, Haiman de Nafik, biyome Nisan, v'chaze Ilanot, says the Gemara. Ilanot means trees. Trees. More than one tree. And be'emet, the Kaf HaChaim, when he brings the halacha, Birkat Ilanot, he clearly says that you need more than one tree. You need 2 trees, fruit trees, in order to do the beracha Birkat Ilanot properly. 1 tree is not enough. Not only that, the Kaf HaChaim actually writes, it's also proper that those 2 trees, it would be better if they were 2 different species of fruit. Meaning 2 apple trees, according to him, is not as good as an apple tree and an orange tree, or 2 different species of fruit. We don't paskin. We paskin that if you did 2 trees and they were both even the same fruit, it's still okay. But the Kaf HaChaim writes, 2 trees, fruit trees, and better that they give off 2 different fruit. But it's very interesting. He be'emet was makbid on 2 trees. However, although the Kaf HaChaim was makbid on making Birkat Ilanot 2 trees, not everyone agreed. The Chida, He brings a very interesting lashon. He says the medaktikim used to do it, Birkat Ilanot, on 2 trees. Now, what do you see from that? When he says the medaktikim, what he's saying is that from the letter of the law, if you would do it on 1 tree, it's okay. But the medaktikim, if you want to do it mahadrin min hamiyad, the best way, there you should do it at least on 2 trees. And like we said, whether it's 2 separate fruit or the same, that's the kaf ha'chaim. Very interesting. But it's interesting, you see the difference, how the kaf ha'chaim, who was makbid on 2 trees, the Chidah says in truth 1 tree is enough. But there are many poskim that run down this lane of 1 or 2 trees. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was known that he would always make the beracha Birkat Ilanot on 2 trees. He wanted to get the concept of malavleve. Interesting. The Rivavot Ephraim brings that the great Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, the great Gadol of America, he would actually make Birkat Ilanot on 1 tree. Rav Moshe Feinstein. Very interesting. He held that was already enough in order to properly do the mitzvah. So now, Rabotai, the other question we wanted to know was, Yome de Nisan. Does it dafka have to be done by day, or can Birkat Ilanot be done by night as well? So it was over there that we saw that there's a big question in the poskim. And I want to show you something very interesting. Rabbi Gladstein points out that the Rivavot Ephraim and the Tzitz Eliezer, they paskin on top of a psak that Chamovadia Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha paskind in regard to our women mechuyavot in Birkat Ilanot or not. Chamovadia paskind, and this is found in Yichavedat, in Chelik Aleph, Siman Bet. He says clearly that women are mechuyavot in Birkat Ilanot. And if that's the case, says the Rivavot Ephraim, then it has to be that Birkat Ilanot is able to be done at night. Because if it wouldn't be able to be done at night, so now it would turn into a mitzvah, shazman, girama. And then women are always patur from time-sensitive mitzvot that are held to a specific time. And if it would only be done by day, it would be held to a specific time, because you can't do it at night. So for the fact that Chamovadia paskind, that women are mechuyavot in the mitzvah, Birkat Ilanot, it has to be, according to his psak, that you could do it by day and by night. Because if it was only by day, it would be mitzvah shazman gerama. Women would be pturot. So for the fact that women are mechuyavot, it's clear that this mitzvah is done not only by day, but could be done at nighttime as well. What an interesting way to paskin a halacha on top of a psak of Chamovadia. Says a very interesting mahalach of the way they did that. Okay, gentlemen, till now, those were the salads. We just wanted to warm you up to the concept and the mitzvah of Birkat Ilanot. And what we have so far, don't underestimate. We have the concept that you could do mitzvah Birkat Ilanot by day and by night. Women are mechuyavot. It should be at least 2 trees. If you have 1 tree, it's still okay according to Reb Moshe, but most poskim held that you should have 2 trees. If there are 2 different fruits, that's up to you. That's already a hidur, but it should be 2 fruit trees. Better that the fruit are edible and not in the years of Orlah. That's what we have so far. So if you find 2 fruit trees that give off preferably edible fruit, and you can do it by day, you're doing great. Even by night is okay, according to the psak of the way they built it off Chamovadia. But now here comes the big stuff. Could you take that clock off to the sefer? Yeah, just I'm not comfortable with it on Sfari. You can put it right there on the chair. Yeah. Thank you. Turn it to me so I can see the time. Thank you. Perfect. It's not in the way of... Yeah. The Gemara says, Hai Gavra, this person, Haiman, the Nafik that went out, Yome Nisan. So we had a question. Yome Nisan, is it only day? It's not night? We just said no, even night. Comes the Kaf HaChaim, and he says something unbelievable. Rabotai, this Kaf HaChaim you must know. This Kaf HaChaim is a Hidush. What a find. He's in Siman Resh Chavav, Sif Katan Dalet. Says the Kaf HaChaim, yes, Yome de Nisan, in the days of Nisan, but not all the days of Nisan. Which day not? Says Kaf HaChaim, you cannot make Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. Why not? Why not? Says the Kaf HaChaim because we're worried that this guy's going to walk up to the tree, he's going to start examining the flower of the Melavleveh to make sure that it's at the point that it should be for the Birachat to be proper. And by doing that, he might end up moving the tree, he might end up touching the flower, he might end up plucking, he might end up... And because of that, it's asur to say Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. And then came the Kaf HaChaim, and he said, Ahidush ayom v'nora mamash. If this doesn't knock you off your chair, I don't know what will. Says the Kaf HaChaim. And you want to know why it's really asur to do Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat? Besides the Darabanan that I just told you, that lest you may come and touch the flower. But he says, I hold that doing Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat is isur deoraita. Deoraita? What melacha are you doing? Looking at a tree on Shabbat and making a beracha. Asur deoraita? Says the Kaf HaChaim, yes. You're all there on the isur borer deoraita. Borer?
Don't touch.
What borer? What am I separating? What am I doing? Says the Kaf HaChaim, I'll tell you what you're doing. You might not know this, and we're going to take a step back for a moment and try to give an explanation here. But there's this amazing concept of Kabbalah. I want to introduce you to a concept that I heard from my Rebbe many times. And this is a huge Segula that we're going to talk about at the end of the class. My Rebbe told me that there's something called the Neshamot HaGalmudot, the Galmudim. These are Neshamot that wander until they get their opportunity to be allowed into Gan Eden. Now, my Rebbe told me something amazing but yet scary. My Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Rabinovich, told me that some of these neshamot are actually tzaddikim, but they need a certain tikkun. They're missing a certain tikkun, something. Or maybe Hashem had a different reason why He didn't allow these neshamot yet into Gan Eden. And they roam and they sway. Sometimes they're chased and they hide. Sometimes they look for a tikkun by going into food. And they wait for somebody to come along and make a beracha on that food. And the blessing, the beracha that you made on that food is the tikkun of the neshama inside that now is allowed to be mishuchrar. It actually is now released. And it's able now, due to the tikkun of the blessing that you made on the food, to enter Gan Eden. Says the Kaf HaChaim, my friend, you don't know al pisod, the huge, unbelievable mitzvah of what you're doing, Birkat Ilanot. Because in this fruit tree, there are many neshamot waiting to come out to be budded in the berries of this fruit. They're going to wait for somebody to come along and pick up that fruit, make a beracha. Or they're waiting for you in these days of Nisan to come up to that fruit tree while they're still in the process of Melavleveh and make a blessing of Birkat Hailanot on that tree, and all the neshamot that are in that tree are released with tikkun al yedei your beracha, and they're allowed now to come up the Shamayim and enter Gan Eden. Says the Kaf HaChaim, but on Shabbat, Al Yedei Yo Beracha, you're being borer, the Nishamot, from the psolet, from the flowers, from the budding fruit. By separating the neshama from the guf, by separating the neshama from the flowers of the fruit tree, you're being over on borer. Whether he sees it as borer, that you're taking psolet from ochel, because you're taking the bad from the good, al yedei, that you made a blessing on the fruit, as it was separated from the neshama. Or maybe no, Pashup Pshat, that he says that al yedei yo beracha, you're separating the neshama from the fruit. And even though that's the good from the bad, but there is no miyad usage, and even that is asur. And if that's the case, says the Kaf HaChaim, to make the mitzvah Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat, you are playing with an isur deoraita, a borer. You're being borer, the neshama, from the fruit, al yedei the tikkun, through the blessing.
Fruit.
And if that, in this case, it's the flower.
But the fruit sometimes.
He's in the tree.
In the tree.
He's in the tree, waiting for the fruit to come out, so that he'll be able to jump in and get the beracha for the tikkun. But now we're holding here by a case that I don't even wait for the fruit. Says the Kaf HaChaim, Birkat Ilanot. And by the way, I want to tell you something, Chevra. Today we did it. We did it with the Kolel today. We went over with all the guys. You have to see, if you read the L'Shem Yehud, in the L'Shem Yehud, we said the words, I am now about to make the beracha on the Ilan. And this beracha should be able to be ma'aleh all the neshamot that are inside this tree, to be able to find their place in Gan Eden. As we were saying the L'Shem Yichud, I couldn't believe the words. It's not even a secret. It's part of the L'Shem Yichud, for heaven's sake. It is the L'Shem Yichud of the mitzvah. Says the Kaf HaChaim, my friend, L'Shem Yichud, you're coming now to be able to be ma'aleh the neshamot from the tree up to Gan Eden. You're going to be separating these neshamot from its budding sprout. He says that's borer b'Shabbat. And because of that, no Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. Kach savar HaKaf HaChaim sofer.
What about holiday, the Pesach day, if not Shabbat?
So here already, obviously, the laws of borer are slightly, not much, because they're very similar, but slightly lighter when it comes to Yom Tov. But let's stick to the point. Yeah. So on Shabbat you cannot do it, says Kaf HaChaim. Comes Chacham Ovadia in Yechav Da'at in Chelik Aleph Siman Bet, and he says, but before I tell you what he says, I need to tell you something. Make no mistake, Chacham Ovadia, if anybody knew the gadlut and the greatness of the Kaf HaChaim, it was Chacham Ovadia. You know that the Kaf HaChaim did not live to finish writing his sefer. Kaf HaChaim passed away before finishing writing his Kaf HaChaim on Shulchan Aruch. Who took over? Who finished the work? Chacham Ovadia. You know that. Chacham Ovadia was very young at the time. He took over the Kaf HaChaim and he finished writing the Kaf HaChaim in his signon, in his style. Mamash, you have to understand the gadlut, what he did. He not only finished writing the Sefer Kaf HaChaim, he wrote it in the style of the Kaf HaChaim. That's how brilliant what he did was. Amazing. Nonetheless, Rabotai, let's just get clarity here. Comes Chacham Ovadia Yosef Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, and he says, I don't understand what this Kaf HaChaim is saying. He said, what was the first reason? He said, the first reason he gave is you might come to touch the flower when making the beracha, and that would already be a problem on Shabbat that you might come and pluck, or move it, or touch it. Says Chamovadia, I don't understand. We know the halacha states that if a person is walking down the block and he sees hadassim that are growing out of the ground, you're allowed to bend over, smell the hadassim on Shabbat, and make borei atzeh b'samim. And there's no problem. We're not worried about you touching it. We're not worried about you plucking it. On Shabbat, you're allowed to go and smell hadassim growing out of the ground and make borei atzeh b'samim. Says Chamovadia, the only time that we have such a halacha is when it comes to fruit. Let's say you have an etrog. An etrog is growing off of a tree, hanging off of the tree. You're walking by on Shabbat and you want to smell the etrog. There, you're not allowed to smell the etrog, lest we're worried you may come to pluck it because it's fruit. But something that's a flower, something that's not a fruit, the halacha is because it's not edible, we're not worried you're going to pluck it to eat it, just to smell it, we're not worried. And therefore, when it comes to flowers, hadassim, you're allowed to walk up to a hadassim tree or bush, it's growing out of the ground, and on Shabbat, you're allowed to smell it. And you're allowed to make the beracha. And if that's the case, says Chamovadia, over here by the tree, I'm not even touching it, and I'm not even smelling it. All I'm doing is looking at it. And I'm making the beracha on the flower of the budding. He says, if that's the case, there's no question in the world that mitzad, the halachic worry of you touching or plucking, there's no problem when it comes to the flower of Birkat Ilanot, and you'd be allowed to make Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. And then Chamovadia said, and to the second tzad, that the Kaf Chaim told us that Birkat Ilanot is a problem on Shabbat because of borer b'Shabbat. Says Chamovadia, how in the world could we think that there's a borer of the spiritual from something of the physical? Says Chamovadia, and he quotes a famous Khatam Sofer. The Khatam Sofer writes, oh, a very strong word, says Khatam Sofer, V'ani Omer, Kol ha'me'arev divrei Kabbalah im halachot uposkim chayav mishum zoreya kilayim. Here is Khatam Sofer. Khatam Sofer says anyone that mixes Kabbalah and Halacha together, he's over on Kilayim, on Shatnez. These things don't go together. You cannot mix these two together. You're paskening Halacha from Kabbalah? You tell me that this is considered borer by taking the neshama out from the physical flower of the tree? Says Khatam Sofer, says Chamovadia, that already is considered kilayim. We don't mix Kabbalah with halacha. And therefore, Chamovadia writes that there is absolutely no problem with making Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. He says, don't get me wrong, especially the Sfaradim, if they want to be Makayim, the greatness of the Kaf HaChaim. So of course, if you had a choice, don't do it on Shabbat, do it on Sunday. But what happens if the last day of Nisan is Shabbat? And that's the only day left to do. Says Chamovadia, 100%, you definitely should do it. There's no question you should do it. And if this is the case, Rabotai, it's just very interesting. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach brings in Halichot Shlomo that there was one year that he actually made Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. He actually did it on Shabbat. He did it on Shabbat. So you see, not just him, the Stipler Gaon once did Birkat Ilanot on Shabbat. Rav Shlomo Zalman brings the Aderet would only do it on Shabbat in order to be mashlim the mea berachot. I mean, let's think about that. On Shabbat, Amidah is short, so we don't have as many berachot. So in order to be mashlim mea berachot b'Shabbat, the Aderet would make sure to do Birkat Ilanot Shabbat in order to be able to have more berachot, in order to be able to be mashlim mea berachot on Shabbat. Okay. So what do we got so far? We got, you can make Birkat Ilanot by day and by night. preferably by day because you can see it better, and it is a Birkat Re'iyah. Second, we're trying to do it on at least 2 trees. If you do it on 1 tree, you'll be Yotzeh. But better to do it on 2 trees, fruit trees, and Mahadrin, Min HaMahadrin, is if the fruit was edible, that's even better. Okay, what else do we got? We got that not only during the weekdays can you do Birkat Ilanot, but according to Chamovadia, you can even do it on Shabbat. However, he says clearly, if you have a choice, better to do it on the weekdays. Like this, you'll be able to be Makayim, the Kaf HaChaim as well. Yes? That's what we have so far. All right, so far we know what we're doing. What about the month of Nisan? The Gemara says, Hai man de nafik, biyome de Nisan. What happens if the month of Nisan, it's not a year like this year, not a leap year, but it's a year where the trees are blooming late. So I finally find a fruit tree that's milavlafle, it's flowering, and you know when? In ER. So I can't make the beracha anymore. I don't have the mitzvah anymore. Well, what happens if you have a year like this year? That you have 2 Adar. So now the tree's had an extra month to cook. And now at the last day of Adar, wow, look at that. I see the flowers already coming out of the fruit tree. I want to make it in the last day of Adar. Am I Yotzeh Birkat Ilanot? The Gemara says Nisan. Is it Dafka Nisan? The Chidah says that this Birkat Ilanot is connected to the month of Nisan. And he says specifically the Beracha, connected to the month of Nisan. Why? What's the correlation? What's the connection? What's so special about the month of Nisan when it comes to Birkat Ilanot Dafka? So talking about not mixing Kabbalah with Halacha, I want to tell you over a Zohar HaKadosh. Because the truth of the matter is that the basis of this mitzvah has tremendous sodot to it. Tremendous secrets to it. Let's talk a little bit about this. There's a magnificent sefer that Rabbi Gladstein brings, the Petach Devir, written by Rabbi Yamin. It's an amazing idea what we're going to bring now, this Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh is found in Parashat Balak. The Zohar writes that there are 2 months a year that the Neshamot are allowed entry into Gan Eden. Tishrei and Nisan. According to one opinion, Tishrei is the beginning of the year. According to another opinion, Nisan is the beginning of the year. Both opinions, these 2 Rosh Hashanah, are the times that Neshamot, new Neshamot, are allowed entry into Gan Eden. Amazing. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, there are these Neshamot HaGalmudot that I told you about in the beginning of the share. The Galmudim, like my Rebbe calls them. These Neshamot HaGalmudot, they need tikkun to be allowed entry to Gan Eden. And therefore, like we mentioned earlier on, many of these Neshamot go into the fruit tree and they wait for somebody to come along, like me and you, and to make a beracha on the tree. If not on the tree, then later on the fruit. But they wait for somebody to come along and make a beracha on the fruit tree in order to give them the tikkun of that blessing, of that beracha, to be mishachrer them, to free them, to allow them entry into Gan Eden. And therefore, Dafka, the month of Nisan, do we have this amazing mitzvah? Because that's the month that the doors of Gan Eden are open now to new entry. These neshamot have been wandering, waiting to finally get into Gan Eden. Now is an opportunity, in the month of opportunity. It's a geula for them. Nisan is the month of geula, not just down here. It's also the month of geula up there, where these neshamot need a geula. It needs to be redeemed an entry to their promised land, to their Gan Eden. And if that's the case, Al Yedei Yo Beracha Birkat Ilanot, in the month that the gates are opened, we're enabling them to be able to be freed, Al Yedei Tikkun, through your blessing, to come into Gan Eden at the time that the doors are open, the month of Nisan. And therefore there's a great ma'ala to do this mitzvah dafka in the month of Nisan. Chamovadia paskins that if for some reason you didn't get it done in the month of Nisan, because let's say the trees were late that year, they didn't flower yet, he says you could still do it in Iyar, but not in Adar. That's what he writes. Not early, not in Adar. Because Adar you still have Nisan. And Nisan is clearly the preferred and the prime. Because of what we just said, Al Pi de Zohar HaKadosh, Al Pi what's going on in this mitzvah, the doors are open, that's the time to give them the tikkun they need to be able to finally enter Gan Eden. But if you didn't do Nisan, Iyar can still be done. That's what Chamovadia paskins. But nonetheless, listen to this, an amazing idea. What's so special about this month of Nisan? The month of Nisan is called Chodesh Ha'aviv. The word Ha'aviv is the giveaway. Aviv is Av Yud Bet. This is the father of all 12 months. This month of Nisan has the Maila and the Kochot and the Segulot of all 12 months of the year.
Shalem.
It's Shalem. This is the Chodesh Ha'aviv, Av Yud Bet. And because of that, it's amazing. The Aruch HaShulchan writes something fascinating. Listen to this. This is a special month to us. This is the month that the Gan Eden opens up. This is the month of Geulah. Guys, I want to ask you an unbelievable question. This is a question, Aruch HaShulchan really deals with this in an amazing way. He says, take a look at the Makot. Paro in the beginning was very stubborn. And he was also chutzpahdik. He was very chutzpah. Mi Hashem? Who's this Hashem? Ashishma bikolo, that I should listen to him. Says the Midrash, Paro made this whole comedy skit in order to get all his people around him to laugh. He started opening up his book of gods. And he says, I don't find them listed. Your God is unlisted. That's what he told Moshe Rabbeinu. And they were all laughing. It was a big schok. In the beginning, Paro was terrible chutzpah. Terrible. There's no other Hashem, just me and the Nilus, he said. As the Makot started picking up speed, after the first 3 Makot, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Paro all of a sudden changed his tone really fast. And suddenly he started to say, okay, Ani va'amir sha'im, Hashem is tzaddik, Ani va'amir sha'im. He started changing his tone very quickly. But you know what's so difficult, so weird? As Paro gets to the last Makkah, suddenly the chutzpah comes back. Suddenly he turns to Moshe Rabbeinu by Makkah Bechorah, where you would expect at that point, listen, Moshe is 9 for 9. He's telling you the 10th Makkah is coming. I mean, come on. Everything he told you that will happen, happened. And instead of Paro mellowing out and loosening and giving up, Paro gets his chutzpah back. By the 10th Makkah, where you expect him to throw in the towel and give up, lahefech, he becomes more chutzpah. And he tells Moshe Rabbeinu, this is the last time I have to see your face. Don't you ever come and appear in front of me again. This is a chutzpah. Where did he get this rejuvenated energy of chutzpah from? Usually you start out the tough guy, and then they mellow and mellow and mellow and mellow until they knock down. The last one, kaput. Over here, he started a tough guy. He mellowed and mellowed and mellowed, and then he comes up for another round like a second wind of chutzpah by the 10th Makkah. What happened? Says Aruch HaShulchan something amazing. Paro said to himself, in Egypt they worshipped the tle. The tle was the symbol of Egypt. It was the god rather of Egypt, but it was the symbol of the month of Nisan. Therefore, Paro, he said, the month of Nisan belongs to Egypt. This is our month. This is the month of our highest mazal. Because that's the month of our God. The God of the clay. That's Nisan. Paro kept telling himself, I gotta just pull through this. I gotta just survive this. I need harvacha. If you see in the pasuk, Paro says he was looking for harvacha. He was looking just to get through it, just so I can get to our month. If I can only get to Nisan, said Paro, then I'll show you. That's when I'll be able to beat your God, because that's the month of the strength of Egypt. It's the month of Nisan belongs to Egypt. It's the month of the clay. That's the month of our God. Then we can fight against you. You know what Hashem did? Hashem made sure to bring Makat Bechorot in Nisan. And Hashem said, I'm going to actually finish them in the month that they call their strongest. I'm going to wipe them out and take you out of Egypt in the month that they think they have the greatest strength. In the month that they think belongs to them. And that's why Borei Olam says to Klal Yisrael, after Makat Bechorot, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chadashim. Doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. This is what they thought was their power month. It belongs, it's your month. This is your month. This is your month of Pesach. This is your month of Geula. Amazing. This was the month that Klal Yisrael realized, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This month of Nisan is our Geula month. And if that's the case, there's a great inyan in this month of Nisan to be able to bring Geula to the Neshamot of Klal Yisrael. You hear this? Unbelievable. And that's why Birkat Ilanot, which Al Yedei the Beracha on the tree, is bringing a certain Geula to these Neshamot to be allowed to enter Gan Eden in the month that Gan Eden is opened. This is the month to bring the Geula to these Neshamot. Therefore, Birkat Ilanot has a clear preference to be done only in the month of Nisan. And now you understand also why the month of Nisan is the month that Gan Eden, the doors are open. In Tishrei, I understand why Gan Eden's doors are open. Because it's the month of judgment. And when Borei Olam judges, he judges the Chaim and the Mavet. He judges the living and those who are no longer alive. They also get judged every year. So it makes sense in the month of judgment, if those Neshamot are found Zakai, then Gan Eden would be open for them to enter. But where does Nisan come from? No. You want to know why Nisan also is your month of Gan Eden? Because HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This is your month of Geula, both in this world and the next world. And Al Yedei, the Birkat Ilanot, it brings a Geula to all the Neshamot HaGalmudot, the Galmudim, that were wandering and swaying and waiting for that tikkun, for this opportunity, in the month that the Gan Eden is open, for them to be able to finally enter to their Gan Eden. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah. If this is the case, Rabotai, I want to give you now the flavor of the share. Before I tell you this unbelievable last piece, which is really why I gave this share in the first place. Number one, to school us a little bit on the mitzvah Birkat Ilanot, to know how to do it the best way. As we were saying till now, the best way, by daytime, in Nisan, 2 trees, preferably edible. Best way, when it comes out, the flowering portion, which is Melav Leveh. We get this done, Mahadrim and HaMahadrin, you'll be able to have a mafteach that will unlock all the incredible blessing of Pesach. What shaychut does Birkat Ilanot have to Pesach? We just got finished explaining the Zohar HaKadosh. We just got finished explaining the Aruch HaShulchan, the shaychut to Nisan, the month of Nisan. But what shaychut to Pesach? Listen to this. Before I just tell you this, I do want to tell you something very powerful. My Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Rabinovich, told me many times, Shalita, he told me that there's this incredible Segula, and it's mamish al derech, what we're talking about tonight. It's the Segula of lighting an oil candle for the Neshamot HaGalmudot. My Rebbe told me that in the Svarim HaKadoshim it brings, and it does not waste, an unbelievable amount of incredible zchuyot that a person is zochetu when he lights an oil candle for Neshamot HaGalmudot. When you light an oil candle for these wandering Neshamot, from these Neshamot that are swaying and wandering and not yet led into Gan Eden, these Neshamot, my Rebbe told me, goes in front of Kudsha B'richu, in front of Kisei HaKavod, and they daven for the person that lit them the oil candle. Because al yedei that oil candle, it gives them a certain zichut, a certain tikkun to get aliyah neshama. And sometimes that aliyah could be the difference of them making it into Gan Eden or not. So they owe you one, my Rebbe told me. They owe you one. This guy lit an oil candle for me, he gave me aliyah neshama, for a neshama that is roaming and swaying. You have no idea the chesed, my Rebbe told me, you do with these neshamot when you light for them an oil candle. And you say, I'm lighting li'ilui nishma, the neshamot hagalmudot, the galmudim, which many of them are tzaddikim. The tzaddikim dolim. That were missing out a tiny mashu, something. And when you gave them an unbelievable aliyah neshama, now they come in front of Kisei HaKavod and they say, Borei Olam, this guy, he gave me aliyah neshama. We're davening for his yeshuot. And they start davening for you to get yeshuot. My Rebbe told me yeshuot adirot were brought to Klal Yisrael through the Segula of lighting oil candles for the Neshamot HaGalmudot, for the Galmudim. My Rebbe told me, he told me countless stories of people that had all different sarot. They needed certain yeshuot, and they were lighting oil candles for Ilu Nishmat, the tzaddikim, the Neshamot HaGalmudim, and they saw incredible yeshuot because they feel incumbent to you. They feel that ki'ilu they owe you, hakarat hatov. They come in front of Kisei HaKavod, and they're an incredible melitz yosher in Shamayim. It's very similar to what we're talking about tonight. Very similar to the process of Birkat Ilanot. Just like Birkat Ilanot, you come up to the tree, you make the beracha, you're ma'aleh, all the neshamot in the tree to Gan Eden, and they look to you b'karat hatov. They look to you b'hakarat hatov. There'll be a melitz yosher for you in Shamayim. So too when you light an oil candle for them, you ma'aleh these neshamot aliyah neshama, and they feel hakarat hatov indebted to you to be able to return the favor. Don't take that lightly. I've heard this from my Rebbe many times. So what does Birkat Ilanot have to do with Pesach, Rabotai? Oh boy, this is big. With a few minutes left, let's do this. Every day when we say Ashrei, the Gemara told us in Berachot Gimel Amud Bet, Dalet Amud Bet, Dalet Amud Bet. The Gemara told us that the reason why we say Ashrei 3 times a day is because it has in it a very special pasuk. Poteach et yadecha u'mazbiah lecho chai ratzon. This is the pasuk of Parnasa. This is the pasuk that I'm supposed to be thinking about, the 3 keys that open up the vault in Shamayim for all shefa to come down to a person for his Parnasa. And what are the 3 keys of Parnasa? So it's right there in the pasuk, Poteach et yadecha, Rashet Tevot, Pe Aleph Yud. That's the first name of Hashem, which is a key to open up the vault of Shefa in Shamayim and bring down wealth on a person. What's the second key? Samech Aleph Lamed, which is the Gematria equivalent of Pe Aleph Yud. And the third key is the Sofet Tevot of Poteach et Yadecha, which is Chatach. So we got Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed, and Chatach. 3 keys. And now we say the word Umasbiya. Umasbiya is Gematria Chatach. L'chol Chai Ratzon. 3 keys for wealth. Amazing. Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed, Chatach. What's the Rashi Tevot of these 3 keys? Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed, Chatach. Pesach! The name of the holiday, Pesach, is Rashi Tevot, Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed, Chatach. Chet Taf Chaf Sofit. To tell you that on the night of Pesach, the vault in Shamayim is open. It is completely and absolutely open for Shefa. And Al Yedei Pesach, you can connect to all 3 keys. Pe, Samach, Chet, Pe Aleph Yud, Samach Aleph Lamed, Chatach, and you can bring down that night the greatest Shefa of all year long. All the vault and storage houses of Ashirut and Shefa and blessing is open to me and you the night of Pesach. You just got to know how to activate those 3 keys. That's Rashi Tevot Pesach. So the $1 million question is, how in the world do I activate these 3 keys? And the answer is the same way Yitzchak Avinu did it with Yaakov Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu told Esav to go catch him a catch. Rivka Imenu told Yaakov, quickly, jump inside. Tonight you're going to get the greatest epic berachot of history. These are the greatest berachot. These are berachot that all Klal Yisrael is going to need. These are the great berachot of the Bechorah. Yaakov Avinu jumps and goes inside with the food that his mother prepared, dressed up like someone else, like Esav. And he comes in front of his father. And I could show you in the Psukim how they did together that night the entire Pesach Seder. Because that night was Pesach. The night of the greatest berachot, the Birkat Yitzchak Avinu to Yaakov, was the night of Pesach. That's why every year my father always told us on the table, that night is the night that you give blessings to your children. You give blessings to each other. It's the night of berachot, Birkat Haben, Me'a'aba. That is the night. It's the night that Yitzchak gave the greatest berachot, Yaakov Avinu. I could show you in the Psukim the entire Pesach Seder. It's just not this week's class. Maybe it'll be next week's class. I could show you in the Psukim the Arba Kosot. I could show you in the Psukim Korban Pesach, Korban Chagiga. I mean, that's what he is for. Shnei Gidai Ezim. Rashi said, Echad lePesach ve'echad leChagiga. I can show you in the Psukim the Afikoman. Ba achicha b'mirma. Mirma is gematria afikoman. Your brother tricked me, said Yitzchak Avinu to Esav. He made me eat afikoman. And now, en maftirin achara pesach afikoman. Once he got me to eat afikoman, I can't eat anything else anymore. And now I can't eat from your food, Esav. And if I can't eat from your food, I can't bless you. Wow, your brother locked me up. Ba achicha b'mirma. He gave me the afikoman to eat. Mirma, gematria afikoman. Amazing. So the night of the greatest blessings of history was the night of Pesach. No wonder it's Pesach. The 3 keys of the greatest Shefa. Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed Chatach. Rashi Tevot Pesach. Because that's the night of Shefa. That's the night of the greatest blessing. But the $1 million secret. How do you unlock the blessing of Pesach with the 3 keys of wealth on the night of the greatest blessings of history? How do we bring back down V'yiten lecha Elokim mital hashamayim mishmanei haaretz rov dagan v'tirosh yavdu chamim yishtachavu lecha bnei leumim? How do we bring these greatest blessings of history down on us again on the night of Pesach, like the way it was given from Yitzchak to Yaakov on the original night of Pesach when he gave him the blessings? How do we do this? Says the Eliyah Rabbah in Siman Resh Chaf Vav. Listen to the Eliyah Rabbah. He gives the secret. Says the Eliyah Rabbah, when a person goes out and does the mitzvah Birkat Ilanot, he's zocheh to the blessing of the pasuk. Reach beni, kereach hasadeh, asher bercho Hashem. You know what the next pasuk is? V'yiten lecha Elokim, bital hashamayim, u'mishmanei haaretz, rov dagan v'tirosh. Says the El Yerabba in very court severta. He says it in very short words because he's being maramis to you a secret. Rabotai, open your hearts. Listen to this El Yerabba. He says if you go out and do Birkat Ilanot, you know what you're coming into Pesach with? The Reach of the Sadeh. When Yaakov Avinu walked into his father Yitzchak on the night of Pesach, you know what Yitzchak Avinu said before he blessed him? My son, your scent is the scent of the Sadeh, like the Sadeh of Gan Eden. Reach beni, kereach hasadeh, asher bercho Hashem. Because he smelled that scent, that gave him the stepping stool to go now and give him the blessings. V'yiten lecha Elokim. Now you're ready for the blessings. You came with the reach beni kereach hasadeh asher bercho Hashem. You came with that shmek of Gan Eden. You came with that mitzvah. Now I can give you the greatest blessings of history. V'yiten lecha Elokim mital hashamayim mishmanei haaretz rov dagan v'tirosh. And therefore, v'hamevin yavin. Especially this year, opportunity, because to Adar, so there was an extra month for the trees to cook. So now in the beginning of Nisan, the trees are already melav leveh. Already the flowering came out as we stood together this morning and did it. You stand in front of those two trees, the fruit trees, preferably by day, preferably weekday, preferably that gives off edible fruit. And you say the beracha with all your kochot. And you have in mind that you'll be meshachrer all the neshamot hagalmudot. It's like Yitziat Mitzrayim for them. It's a minuscule Yitziat Mitzrayim. And now they're able to enter Gan Eden. And they're going to daven for you. Because now they owe you, my Rebbe said. They're indebted to you. You were metaking them. They were roaming and chased and roaming. And finally they can get into Gan Eden. Al Yidei Yor Beracha. Now because you were mizakeh, such special nishamot, now you can come into Pesach with a certain beautiful scent. That you helped Isa Yid. You don't know what it means to help out a Jew in such a predicament. Now you can be zocheh to the greatest blessings of Pesach. V'yiten lecha Elokim mital hashamayim. Pesach, all three keys of Shefa. My Rebbe told me today, I was speaking to my Rebbe today on the phone. He said to me, when the Baal HaTanya passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek was his mimaleh makom. But the Tzemach Tzedek wanted so much to get a gilui of the Baal HaTanya, that he should come back to him, that he should tell him, was tutzach in the next world, what's going on? And he went and he davened and davened and davened. But he was not zochet to a gilui. Then the Tzemach Tzedek decided, okay, I'm going to be betanit. So he fasted and fasted and fasted. He did not get the gilui. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, one day he was walking to shul, and as he was on his way to shul, there was a yid there. And he was there with one of his animals. And the animal, there was something there, he was stuck, whatever it was. The yid, in order to save the animal, he needed a loan of 50 golden ruble. He says, Rebbe, could you just please lend me? I'm in dire strait. My parnassah is on the line. I need this just to feed my family. Can you just give me a loan for 50 golden ruble? The Tzemach Tzedek said, of course, save another yid. To save another yid? Of course I'll help you. He ran back to the house. He got the 50 golden ruble, came back and gave it to him. That night, the Tzemach Tzedek had the Gilui, the Baal HaTanya. Said the Tzemach Tzedek, look, Hundreds of tefillot and sigufim, ta'aniyot. And that was not able to bring me to the Gilui of the Balatanya. But I helped out one Yid. That brought me to the Gilui of Balatanya. Rabotai, we're going this year to help out Yidden. We're going to go with the Sidur. We're going to go to the Birkat Ilanot. We're going to give a tremendous aliyah to these neshamot. But Rabotai, what about Yidden here? So many people are suffering today. So many people are suffering. Be'ezrat Hashem, Wednesday night, I'm going to talk to you about the Kimcha the Pischa program that we already started for the Almanot and the Yitomim here in America and especially in Eretz Yisrael, families that are distraught. Now, after this terror attack, there's new Almanot with many Yitomim. I'm in touch with Kupat Ha'ir to be able to help something to give them for Pesach, to give them something. We're going to talk about this Be'ezrat Hashem on Wednesday night. But the page is already up on the Chesed Fund. You can check it out, Rabbi Duvi's Almanot Yitomim Fund. For Kimcha de Pischa, you'll see it. Any donation, what it means to help out another Jew at a time when they're broken, when they have nothing. We should be zocheh, to be ma'aleh the neshamot. Through Birkat Ilanot, we'll be zocheh to the Segula of the Galmudim, but maybe even bigger. We'll be zocheh to the great zichut of helping out Jews here in Klal Yisrael that are in desperate need now. So like this, Al Yedeh, the Kimcha de Pischa, Birkat Ilanot, we could come into the night of Pe Aleph Yud, Samech Aleph Lamed, Chatach, the night of the Shefa, the three keys of Parnasa. Pesach, Rashi Tevot, Pesach, the night of Yiten L'chai Elokim. We could come in that night with the Reach B'nei, Kereach HaSadeh, Asher Berecho Hashem, and then Borei Olam will say, I smell it on you. V'yiten L'cha Elokim, Vital HaShamayim, Shmanei Haaretz, Rov Dagam V'tirosh. Thank you for listening.